more creators are spinning up their own agencies. Dhar Mann has one, Corporate Natalie has one, even Alex Cooper has one. Issa Rae, who comes from traditional entertainment, also has her own ad agency, which she launched back in 2024. Mr. Beast has not launched one yet, but he is working on a platform to connect big brands and creators. Then, of course, there's Creator Camp, who we'll hear from later in the show. This isn't an entirely new trend, but it does seem to be ramping up lately. If you think about Influencer, right, which was founded by YouTuber Casper Lee and Ben Jeffries, that was all the way back in 2015, right? That was so long ago. But Jasmine, you've been following the influencer agency world for a long time. So what do you make of this?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, as you might expect, but immediately my first thought is that the solution to the problems in influencer marketing probably isn't more ad agencies, even from creators themselves. And I think more broadly speaking, many of these creators are probably looking to boost their own businesses more than anything else, because it's also really hard to build and scale an ad agency. But okay, positives first, because there is a lot of upheaval in the agency world, which means that there's also a ton of opportunity for new players to come in. And that is especially true for agencies that are specialized in influencer marketing. Like, if you think about all of the consolidation that's happening in the agency landscape right now, influencer agencies really are some of the hottest acquisition targets from big holding companies as they're trying to build out and bolster their influencer marketing efforts. And we recently spoke to Jenny Quigley-Jones from Digital Voices, which was just acquired by PMG agency, about this. And then you have other holding companies that are building out their own influencer divisions as well as their own tech. And the best example of this is Omnicom, which has been expanding its influencer division that's called Creo. Of course, all of this is really coming from increasing demand among brands for influencer marketing. So a report from the IAB shows that spending on creator ads will reach $44 billion this year, and the growth is outpacing traditional media. And these big traditional advertising giants know that they really do need to bolster their influencer efforts to keep up with all of this. At the same time, we are also seeing that brands just want new ways of working with creators, and established ad agencies really just don't have the best reputation. Like, yes, of course, they have their benefits, like handling negotiations. They also add structure, but they can also complicate things, and brands really don't want too many middlemen between them and creators. They want to know that how they're spending their influencer dollars. And they also want to have a direct line to creators on creative briefs as well as feedback. And that often isn't the case when you have a third-party agency involved. And now you're seeing a lot more brands moving their influencer operations in-house, at least to the extent that they can. And there's data now that actually supports all of this. So according to a recent report from the Association of National Advertisers, only about half of marketers have full visibility into how much of their influencer dollars are actually going to creators. I mean, that is absolutely wild. And then there's a stat that we've referenced before on this podcast from Creator Vision, which shows that 85% of creators never hear feedback from brands. My point is, working with an in-house agency from a creator could really help to solve some of those issues.
For sure. I mean, both of those stats are mind-blowing. It's like, how are these campaigns supposed to work or get better? How are these relationships supposed to be long-term if there's no communication? But I digress. So we've also spoken to creators who have launched their own agencies about this, including Creator Camp's Max Reisinger, not Max Klemenko, although who knows, maybe there's an agency for him in the future. But anyway, the creator's pitch is really that they understand the creative, they know the platforms, they're embedded in the culture, and the people who work at these agencies, are creators with massive followings themselves, right? And they can apply those learnings to the work that they do for brands. Creators can also move faster, right? They're a lot scrappier, there's less red tape and hoops to jump through, and that's really attractive to brands who really want to be in the culture, relevant to audiences. And to your point, in her announcement, Corporate Natalie also talked a lot about how the influencer marketing industry is broken because there isn't that direct line of communication between brands and creators. And that can cause all sorts of problems, from miscommunication on creative briefs to never hearing back about how the content performs. And her goal is to fix that by bringing creators earlier into the process and working together with the brands on everything from the brief to measuring performance.
Yeah, on paper, all of this makes perfect sense. And for Corporate Natalie, I think one of the big things that's working in her favor is that she's focused on B2B, which is still a huge white space for influencer marketing. And there's a lot of need for specialists who really get the space, and she certainly does. But, and this is a very big but, it's going to be very hard for these new creator shops to convince brands to come on board beyond select campaigns. And even when they do, these creator ad agencies are probably still going to have to work with another preferred agency from a brand or an in-house team because while creators definitely understand the creative side of influencer marketing, most of them just don't have experience or expertise in the media buying side of things. And that's where the big money really is. And also why these massive holding companies are going to have an edge on smaller players, including those from creators. I mean, that's one of the big reasons that we're seeing so many smaller influencer agencies get snapped up right now. Plus, these creator ad agencies just don't have the infrastructure or the technology that these big companies do. So their ad agencies are mostly being built on relationships and reputation, and that can only get you so far. So really, unless these creators are building teams with real media buying experience, as well as the tech that they need to support this, they're largely going to be working on organic social campaigns, which is just a very different thing than the big budget influencer campaigns that we see right now.
At the same time, we always talk about this, but the merging, the hybrid, the convergence, right? We've seen also some big agencies now have creators on their payroll as well. So, a really good example of this is Creator Collab from Razorfish. They have an entire team of creators who produce content for brands at what they say is a much faster speed and in a much more natural way than an agency could do on its own. One big difference, though, is that these creators are not going to be big name stars like a Dhar Mann or an Alex Cooper. They're probably going to be much smaller creators who are really good at creating content and want more sustainable and predictable income, plus all the benefits that you get at a traditional company like health insurance and paid time off. And, sometimes they're literally just producing the content and not starring in it at all. But I think the fact that more established agencies are hiring creators does pose a challenge to these new creator agencies because that is their big selling point.
To their credit, I think a lot of creators have recognized this, right? And many of them are bringing on experienced advertising leaders to help with their efforts. So the CEO of Dhar Mann Studios is Sean Atkins, who was previously at Jelly Smack as well as at MTV. Alex Cooper most recently hired Joanne Bradford as the president of Unwell. And as part of that, she's going to oversee the in-house advertising operations. If you don't know Joanne Bradford, she has been in the ad and marketing industry for over 30 years. She's held roles like president of online shopping platform Honey, COO and CMO of SoFi, and she's also worked in revenue and marketing roles at Pinterest, Yahoo, and Microsoft. So quite the resume.
So, as an aside on Alex Cooper, because we couldn't talk about her without getting into some of the drama that's been happening, which we dove into a little bit more. But the timing of that announcement of Joanne's hiring was really interesting, given it came during all the drama with Alex Earl. And then they also just announced that Cooper's first acting role is happening alongside Anne Hathaway amid all of this, which obviously is such a big announcement and such a huge deal. But, I've talked to so many startup founders over the years, and often, they choose very strategically when to announce that they raised funding or hired an executive. Sometimes it's months later, right? To time it with a specific moment or maybe to distract from any negativity. But back to creator agencies, there's also Ian Schaefer, who's the co-founder and president of Ensemble, which is Issa Rae's company. And Ian also is a seasoned executive, with experience in media and investing. He will also be one of our speakers on a panel about the future of entertainment at the Scalable Summit on May 6th. And Jasmine, you caught up recently with him about all this.
I sure did. And he confirmed a lot of what we've been talking about. So he called the agency landscape a quote minefield. And he also said that he thinks a lot of these new creator agencies are really just about scaling the talent themselves. And I think that's spot on. I mean, it's very unlikely that these creators are actually looking to seriously take on any of the big players in the agency space. Like, I think the true value of these agencies for a lot of these creators is to have a more streamlined process for them to handle their own brand deals rather than actually trying to compete with the big leagues. And most importantly, running your own agency as a creator can help ensure that you get paid on time and well, because one of the biggest complaints that we hear from creators is missing or late payments or low pay rates. And a lot of these issues also stem from or are exacerbated by traditional ad agencies since they're acting as middlemen and taking a cut of payments. How much, you might ask? Their fees vary widely, anywhere from 10% to over 50%, according to the Association of National Advertisers. But on average, they take about 30% of influencer spending coming from brands. That is now cash that could be in creators' pockets.
Honestly, it's smart. And I understand why these creators are going this route because so many people stumble into being a creator. They don't come into it with a real exit plan or even realizing it's a real business. And I don't necessarily mean a traditional exit, like selling the business, though that obviously is something that creators are thinking about and can happen in this space. But a lot of them more so are thinking about like how to not be on the hamster wheel of always having to be forward facing on camera, making content. We talked about this with Complexly CEO Julie Walsh Smith, with the Green Brothers, and how they've been slowly plotting that exit and not having to be the face of Complexly. But for others that means a physical product or building a brand, or for others it's this agency model that also lets them have a bit more of a behind the scenes role and work with other talent.